18 yellow cards, a tunnel brawl, a post-match insult caught on camera. The most chaotic World Cup match in modern history, and at the center of all of it, the quietest man in football. For 2 decades, opponents had tried everything to provoke Messi. Nobody succeeded. But on this night, it changed. So, what did Van Gaal say that was different? And why did it cost his country a place in the semi-finals? This is when provoking the GOAT costs this country everything. Before the chaos, before the tunnel brawl, before Messi swore at an opponent on live television, you need to understand one thing. Argentina versus the Netherlands has never been a normal football match. Every time these two countries share a World Cup pitch, something breaks. A record, a relationship, a referee's authority. 6 meetings across 5 decades, not one ended peacefully. It starts in 1974, West Germany. Johan Cruyff's Netherlands, the team that invented total football, drew Argentina in the second group stage. What follows isn't a contest. It's a demolition, 4-0. Cruyff scores twice. Argentina doesn't just lose, they're humiliated on a global stage by a style of football they've never seen before. That scoreline became a scar on Argentine football. For the Dutch, it became proof that their way was the future. But what happened 4 years later made sure neither country would ever forget the other. Buenos Aires. Argentina hosted the World Cup under a military dictatorship. The Netherlands arrive without Cruyff. He stays home after an armed intruder threatened his family in Barcelona. The Dutch are already furious before the final even begins. And then Argentina plays its first card. They emerge from the tunnel 5 minutes late. Deliberate. The crowd whips itself into a frenzy while the Dutch stand in the corridor waiting. Then Argentina's players protest the plaster cast on René van der Kerkhof's wrist, a cast he'd worn in every previous game without a single complaint. The referee forces him to rebandage it. The Dutch threaten to walk off the pitch entirely. The final itself is brutal. Fouls, hostility, confetti so thick it covers the grass. Kempes scores twice in extra time. Argentina lifted their first World Cup. The Netherlands refuses to attend the post-match ceremony. 44 years later, Dutch football still hasn't accepted that result. The suspicious 6-0 win over Peru sent Argentina to the final. The stalling tactics. The atmosphere is designed to intimidate. For the Netherlands, 1978 wasn't a defeat. It was a robbery. And that bitterness didn't fade. It fermented. And 20 years later, the Dutch finally got their revenge in the cruelest way imaginable. During the 1998 quarter-final, the tension level was almost burning. The match was level at 1-1 heading into the final minute. Then, Argentina's Ariel Ortega loses his head, headbutts Dutch goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar, and gets himself sent off. Argentina were now down to 10 men, 90 seconds remaining. Out of nowhere, a 60-yard pass sails over the Argentine defense. Dennis Bergkamp controls it, flicks it past the last defender with his second touch, and buries a volley with his third. 3 touches, one of the greatest goals ever scored. Netherlands 2, Argentina 1. That goal became a monument in Dutch football. For Argentina, it became another wound that never closed. 2006 brought a meaningless group stage draw, but 2014 brought the opposite. A suffocating semi-final in Sao Paulo, 120 minutes without a single goal, decided on penalties. Argentina's goalkeeper, Sergio Romero, saved 2. The Dutch went home empty-handed, again. By December 2022, 5 decades of controversy, heartbreak, and bitterness had been passed down from one generation to the next. Every player who pulled on an orange shirt or a blue and white stripe inherited ghosts from matches they never played in. This was never just a football rivalry. This was a blood feud with a scoreboard. And into this powder keg walked a 71-year-old Dutchman, Louis van Gaal, who wasn't just carrying his country's World Cup history, he was carrying a personal grudge against Argentine football that dated back 20 years. One that had nothing to do with the World Cup, and everything to do with what he did to Lionel Messi's childhood hero inside the walls of Camp Nou. That history is what made Van Gaal's pre-match press conference so dangerous, because the words he chose didn't just provoke a player, they triggered something that had been building since Messi was 15. Most people think the provocation started with a press conference in Qatar. It didn't. It started 20 years earlier, inside the walls of Camp Nou, when Louis van Gaal systematically destroyed the Barcelona career of one of Lionel Messi's childhood hero, and Messi never forgave him for it. In 2002, Van Gaal returned to Barcelona for his second stint as manager. His first move was to force out Rivaldo, the reigning Ballon d'Or winner, for refusing to play on the left wing. Sold him to AC Milan, cleared the decks. Into the void came one Roman Riquelme. If you don't know who Riquelme is, understand this. In Argentina, he's royalty, a two-time Copa Libertadores winner with Boca Juniors. A playmaker so elegant, so instinctive, that an entire generation of Argentine kids grew up imitating him. His signature celebration, cupping his ears, the Topo Gigio, was iconic across South America before Messi had even made his professional debut. Barcelona paid 11 million euros to bring Riquelme from Boca. The fans were ecstatic, the board was delighted, and then Van Gaal opened his mouth. He called Riquelme a political signing, in public, before the player had kicked a ball, and it got worse. Van Gaal told Riquelme directly, "You're the best player when you have the ball, but when you don't, we play with one less." If that sounds familiar, it should, because 20 years later, Van Gaal would say almost the exact same thing about Lionel Messi before a World Cup quarter-final. The same criticism, the same tone. The same Dutchman is dismissing the same type of Argentine genius. But in 2002, Riquelme didn't have the armband of a national team to fight back with. He had nothing. Van Gaal didn't just criticize Riquelme, he buried him. He forced a natural number 10, a player whose entire game depended on operating centrally, to play on the wing. When Riquelme drifted inside to find his natural position, Van Gaal scolded him publicly. When Riquelme scored, Van Gaal barely acknowledged it. The message was clear: this player doesn't fit my system, and I'm going to make sure everyone at this club knows it. Riquelme played 42 matches for Barcelona, scored 6 goals. Never once was he trusted with the role that had made him one of the best players in the world. His minutes were cut. His confidence was shattered. His career in European football was nearly destroyed. By January 2003, Barcelona were 12th in La Liga, 3 points above the relegation zone. Van Gaal was sacked, but the damage to Riquelme was already done. He was loaned out to Villarreal, where he was rebuilt by Manuel Pellegrini, earned a nomination for FIFA World Player of the Year, and helped the club reach the Champions League semi-finals. He proved Van Gaal wrong, spectacularly, but his Barcelona career never recovered, and Argentine football never forgot who was responsible. Riquelme himself refused to speak badly of Van Gaal publicly. Others weren't so gracious. Christos Stoichkov, Barcelona's Ballon d'Or winner, put it bluntly: why didn't Riquelme triumph at Barca? Because he had a dickhead like Van Gaal as his coach. And there was one more person who never forgot what Van Gaal did. A left-footed teenager training at La Masia who idolized Riquelme, who watched everything that happened to his hero from inside the same building, who was too shy to even speak to Riquelme when they crossed paths in the hallway. Josep Maria Minguella, the agent who brought Messi to Barcelona, confirmed it years later. For him, Riquelme was one of his great idols. He was left-footed, playing in the number 10 position in Barcelona's first team. Leo would only look at him because he was very shy. That teenager was Lionel Messi, and he remembered everything. But here's the thing, Louis van Gaal would do something right before the game between Argentina and the Netherlands. He repeated a pattern, the same words, the same dismissal, the same Dutchman telling the world that another Argentine genius wasn't good enough. But this time, the Argentine standing on the other side wasn't a player who could be silenced by a manager. This time, it was the greatest footballer who ever lived. And he had a World Cup quarter-final to deliver his response. Van Gaal had picked his target. The question was whether he understood what he was about to wake up. When reporters asked Van Gaal how he planned to stop Messi, the Dutch manager laughed confidently and said, "Messi is the most dangerous creative player," he told NOS. "He is able to create a lot and to score goals himself, but when they lose the ball and the opponent has possession, he doesn't participate much. That is where our chances lie." He doesn't participate much. The exact same criticism, the exact same framing. The same Dutchman is telling the world that an Argentine genius does wonderful things on the ball, but doesn't work hard enough off it. 20 years earlier, he'd said it about Riquelme. The words were almost identical, and if Van Gaal didn't see the parallel, every Argentine watching certainly did. But he wasn't finished. When pushed on his tactical plan to contain Messi, Van Gaal waved the question away. "You will see on Friday. I won't tell you." Then he smirked. "It would be pretty stupid of us to reveal that, but it's not that difficult to come up with an answer for how to stop him. Not that difficult. The greatest player of all time." And Van Gaal treated the question of stopping him like a minor inconvenience, something he'd figured out between breakfast and training. The Dutch goalkeeper, Andries Noppert, added fuel from his own press conference, making comments about Messi's weaknesses. Virgil van Dijk, the Dutch captain, echoed the tone, respectful on the surface, but laced with the same confidence that bordered on arrogance. The message from the entire Dutch camp was clear. We're not afraid of him. We've done this before. We know the plan. And every word of it reached the Argentine dressing room. Messi doesn't usually respond to provocation before a match. He spent 20 years ignoring mind games, letting defenders kick him without reacting, walking past journalists without engaging. That restraint is what made him different from every other superstar who has ever played the game. But Van Gaal had touched something deeper than football. Van Gaal wasn't just questioning Messi's work rate. He was questioning what Argentine football valued. The number 10, the enganche, the player who makes beauty out of stillness. The tradition that produced Maradona, Riquelme, and Messi himself. Messi confirmed it a year later. "I believe Van Gaal intentionally provoked me, and their goalkeeper also made some remarks before the match. I find these actions unacceptable." And then the line that explained everything. "I don't like people talking before matches. That's not part of football. I always respect everyone, but I like to be respected too. And they were not respectful to us before the game." Respect, that's what it came down to. On December 9th, 2022, at the Lusail iconic stadium, the Argentine captain walked onto the pitch carrying something the football world had never seen him bring to a match before. And for 83 minutes, the Netherlands were going to find out exactly what that looked like. For 30 minutes, the game was dead, cagey, disciplined. It was supposed to be a routine, boring match, but it wasn't. Two good teams were waiting for someone to blink. Messi drifted between the lines, looking for space, but the Dutch midfield closed every door before he could open it. If you were just tuning in, you'd have thought this was heading for a tense stalemate. But the anger from the press conference hadn't disappeared. It was waiting, and in the 35th minute, Messi gave it its first outlet. He picked up the ball 30 yards from the goal. 3 Dutch defenders are blocking the path. Any other player would have recycled possession. Messi waited half a second longer than anyone else would dare to. Then he threaded a pass so precise it cut through the entire Dutch defensive line like it wasn't there. Nahuel Molina finished calmly, 1-0. That pass was Messi's answer to Van Gaal. The man who said stopping him wasn't that difficult had just watched his entire defensive plan sliced open with a single ball. But the real statement was still 38 minutes away. 73rd minute. Dumfries fouls Acuna in the box. Penalty. Messi steps up, sends Noppert the wrong way. 2-0. And then he does it. He doesn't celebrate with his teammates. He turns toward the touchline, walks to the Dutch bench, plants his feet, cups his hands behind his ears, and stares directly at Louis van Gaal. Riquelme's celebration, the same gesture his childhood idol aimed at the same man inside Camp Nou 20 years earlier. Delivered in a World Cup quarter-final, in front of millions watching, by the greatest player who ever lived. This wasn't a goal celebration. This was 20 years of history fired at point-blank range. Messi later admitted what he thought the instant he did it. What an idiot. They can still tie it. He was right, and the football gods were listening. 83rd minute. Berghuis whips across into Weghorst. The 6 feet 6 inches striker Van Gaal threw on to manufacture chaos, and he heads it home, 2-1. Then everything detonates. In the 88th minute, Paredes commits a foul near the touchline, stands up and smashes the ball directly into the Dutch bench. Substitutes sprint onto the pitch. Van Dijk charges at Paredes and shoves him to the ground. Bodies collide. Staff from both sides pile in. Yellow cards everywhere. The referee adds 10 minutes of stoppage time. And in the 101st minute, the very last act of normal time, the Netherlands found a crack that shouldn't have existed. A free kick on the edge of the box. Everyone expects a cross. Instead, Koopmeiners rolls a short pass sideways. The wall shifts a second too late. Weghorst controls it and sweeps a finish into the bottom corner. 2-2. Messi, the man who had cupped his ears at Van Gaal 20 minutes earlier, stood at the halfway line, motionless. Extra time solved nothing. Lautaro Martinez hit the post. Enzo Fernandez rattled the woodwork in the final seconds. The score stayed 2-2, and so the most chaotic World Cup match in modern history came down to the one thing Van Gaal had predicted before kickoff: penalties. And what happened next would make the celebration, the brawl, and the 10 minutes of stoppage time look calm by comparison. By the time the players lined up for penalties, football had already left the building. This wasn't a shootout between two teams trying to advance. This was a psychological war between two dressing rooms that hated each other, conducted 12 yards from goal. And standing between the posts for Argentina was the one man who thrived in exactly this kind of chaos. Emiliano Martinez didn't just save penalties, he destroyed the men, taking them. And before the shootout even started, he'd already heard what Van Gaal had said before the match, that the Netherlands had the advantage on penalties, that if the game went to spot kicks, the Dutch would win. Martinez hadn't forgotten, and he was about to make Van Gaal regret every word. Virgil van Dijk stepped up first for the Netherlands. The Dutch captain, the man who'd shoved Paredes to the ground 40 minutes earlier, the leader. Martinez stared him down, moved the ball off the spot, delayed, talked, did everything short of grabbing Van Dijk by the collar. Van Dijk struck it to the right. Martinez dived the right way, saved. The Argentine bench erupted. The Dutch bench went silent. Messi stepped up next, calm, unhurried, as if the previous 2 hours of chaos had happened to someone else. He placed the ball, picked his corner, and converted. Argentina 1, Netherlands 0. Steven Berghuis walked up for the Dutch second penalty. Martinez was already in his head, talking, pointing, stalling. Berghuis hit it low. Martinez dived again, saved again. 2 Dutch penalties, 2 saves. The shootout was effectively over before the Netherlands had even scored. The remaining kicks were a formality. Argentina converted, the Dutch managed one, and when Lautaro Martinez stepped up with the chance to finish it, he didn't hesitate. Bottom corner, net. Argentina won 4-3 on penalties. But instead of relief, instead of the normal embrace and tears and national anthem that follows a World Cup shootout victory, what came next was something else entirely. The moment Lautaro's penalty hit the net, the Argentine squad sprinted toward the Dutch half of the pitch. Not to celebrate together, to celebrate at the Netherlands. Nicolas Otamendi ran directly at the Dutch players, cupping his ears, the same Riquelme gesture Messi had used an hour earlier. He aimed it at every orange shirt he could find. Dutch players reacted instantly. Denzel Dumfries shoved an Argentine. More players rushed in. Another brawl broke out on the pitch, seconds after the winning penalty. Mateu Lahoz, still somehow holding a whistle, showed Dumfries a second yellow card, a red, sent off during a penalty shootout celebration. The booking count for the match reached its final total, 18 yellow cards and 1 red. A World Cup record that had never been approached before and may never be approached again. But the real damage wasn't on the pitch, it was in the tunnel. Reports emerged within hours of Argentine and Dutch staff confronting each other in the corridors of the Lusail stadium, shoving, screaming. Security is separating the two delegations. A World Cup quarter-final that had been reduced to a hallway brawl. And then came the interview. Messi stood in front of TYC sports cameras, still in his match kit, still breathing hard, still visibly furious. The calm that had defined his entire public life for 20 years was gone. What was left was raw and unfiltered. He went after Van Gaal first. Van Gaal sells that he plays good football, but what he did was put on tall people and hit long balls. He went after the referee. FIFA can't put a referee like that in a match like this. He's not up to par. And then, mid-interview, Wout Weghorst walked past. The striker who'd scored twice. The man who'd been brought on specifically to disrupt. The player who, according to Messi, had spent the entire match bumping into Argentine players and provoking them. Messi didn't let him pass in silence. He turned his head, locked eyes, and snapped. K mirrors, Bobo. What are you looking at, fool?
Un poco caliente por el final.
¿Qué mira, bobo? ¿Qué mira, bobo? Anda para allá, bobo. Anda para allá.
Tranquilo.
On camera, no filter, no apology. The most famous footballer alive, telling an opponent to his face exactly what he thought of him, while a journalist held a microphone 6 inches from his mouth. The clip went viral within minutes. By midnight, "Que miras, Bobo" was the most searched phrase on the internet. By morning, it was printed on t-shirts across Buenos Aires. Emi Martinez delivered his own verdict on Van Gaal's pre-match predictions. "I heard Van Gaal saying they've got an advantage on penalties, that if they go to penalties, they win. I think he needs to keep his mouth shut." FIFA opened disciplinary proceedings against both federations the next day. Disorderly conduct, team misconduct, a formal acknowledgement that what had happened at Lusail had crossed every line the sport was supposed to have. The Battle of Lusail was over. Argentina had survived. The Netherlands were going home. But 2 weeks later, when Messi lifted the World Cup trophy in the same stadium, after beating Croatia in the semi-final and France in the greatest final ever played, one image kept resurfacing. Not the trophy lift, not the golden ball, not the embrace with his family on the pitch. The cup tears, aimed at a 71-year-old Dutch manager who thought he could dismiss Lionel Messi the same way he dismissed Juan Roman Riquelme. And that image is what makes this story worth telling, because it answers the question the entire football world was asking that night in Lusail. What happens when you provoke the GOAT? You lose. 18 yellow cards, 1 red, a tunnel brawl, a post-match insult broadcast to the entire planet. The most chaotic World Cup match in modern history, triggered by a press conference. Van Gaal questioned Messi's effort. Messi answered with an assist that split the Dutch defence in half, a penalty he celebrated in Van Gaal's face, and 4 words aimed at a striker on live television. The Netherlands went home. Van Gaal's career ended that night. Argentina lifted the World Cup 2 weeks later. 50 years of rivalry, 20 years of grudge, 90 minutes of fury, all because one man decided to provoke the GOAT.